It's not very often do we get a series that uses the element of time as one of their main focal points in their story. Given the most recent episode, we finally understand how Linklick really handles timelines and the reason behind the seemingly slow pace of Season 2. If you really think about it, it's been potentially less than 48 hours in their time since the start of the first episode all the way up to episode 8, which is kinda crazy to think about for pacing of any show. But it seems like Season 2 was written this way on purpose. We were given hints in episode 1 that Luguang was not necessarily from an alternate timeline, but rather had information given to him caused by the effects of going back in time. To get to this point, there's potentially going to be a lot of interconnecting pieces in order to achieve the best timeline, so it's necessary to keep the timeline short to help keep things consistent. We get the big reveal as to how Luguang manages to escape out of the hospital. A little anticlimactic, but we did get to confirm a theory a lot of us had. It was a little less extravagant than we thought, but escaped nonetheless. The scene of the upward-facing camera before going dark really gave it away that a picture was going to come into play for events in the future. And before leaving, he places the phone at a place where he knew they would find, which allows this play to happen. For those who are confused, how this works is that no matter what events are to follow after Luguang gets captured, it would be inevitable that Chang would find the phone and go back to the exact time to reenact the same event, which is what we call a point of convergence. Currently, we do not know whether or not physical injuries has any effect on the persons doing the body possessing, but considering how Luguang was moving while fighting Tenchi, or rather Tenshin, we can assume that it doesn't. Which leads to another question. Why did Chang release his possession of Luguang and let him endure the punishment given his condition? We don't know the full extent of Chang's ability and whether or not he can control multiple people at one given time from multiple timelines. But given what happened when he possessed Tenchi and he was kicked out of her body when he is potentially in Lu Fan's body, so then it seems that he can only be in one person's body at any given time, which makes sense as it'll present an infinity paradox of him being potentially able to possess every single person on the planet at any given time. So then, he must have released his control of Luguang for a very good reason, meaning this isn't the first time this event played out probably, which is why it seemed like Chang willingly let Luguang get captured, and how the events differed when he possessed Luguang at the hospital as it appears that the officer does in fact see him this time. Also, don't forget, Chang did mention it himself as well, the photo Luguang took at the hospital was a turning point when necessary. The policeman in question originally told the chief that they were too busy checking out the broken window that he slipped out of the room without them noticing. So why was he so obsessed with the entrance this time around? Meaning, him being found this time meant that the turning point came into play. So their first attempt potentially went poorly, so they had to alter the events yet again. Lastly, there's one more point that may or may not be important, and that is why Xiaoling was necessary in being there that Luguang gave her the coordinates, but she really didn't do much there. Was it as simple as her being just a distraction in order for him to make it in time? But then why not just go earlier because Luguang seemed to know the exact time? It could also be that she was necessary to distract him of his boat before they realized it, or something completely unrelated. Regardless, I wouldn't have our hopes too high. It was just a point worth noting if it ever does come into play later. Now for Tenshin, we finally get answers to a lot of our confusion as to what's going on with the twins. He was disguised as Tenchi this entire time. Originally when I brought up this scene back in episode 4 and I might have made a mistake on the translation when King called Tenshin and addressed him as a madman over the phone. Because pronouns in Mandarin has no genders but Linklick is directly translated by Billy, so there's a decent chance that it was intentional. Especially given the context where they discreetly show Tenchi's bangs, which was something us audience wouldn't be paying attention to at that given time. Thinking back, it might have been more obvious than we thought, because nobody could tell a lie to Tenchi due to her heightened senses, and Chang managed to hide the fact that he was mic'd up with a tracking device. Which brings us to another question. How long has Tenshin been disguising himself as Tenshi and vice versa? Back at the night raid in the beginning of the season at the hospital, there are two possibilities. First, Tenshin was never present and Tenshi was disguised as Tenshin at the car when Keen handed the photo to her, and ran back into the hospital to trick the thug to get Minlu's phone. This would mean that Bin was never controlled by Tenshin, so his death was caused by something else entirely. Or two, which is probably the more likely event. And that is Tenshin was actually in the car with Keen and he possessed Bin to make him jump off the roof. While Tenshi, disguised as Tenshin, got the phone from the thug, which caught him off guard because he appeared out of nowhere. Originally, there was a theory that Tenshi was just possessing her brother through a photo and that's how he mysteriously appeared out of nowhere. But now, given the fact that they've been disguising themselves as each other, it no longer seems that believable of a theory. Now that's over, there's another question, and I feel like I've been saying that a lot, and that's what Link Clink Season 2 is all about. Questions upon questions upon questions. Why did Tenshin even disguise himself as Tenshi? In the latest episode, Keen seems to think that it's about time she would be discovered, but he also couldn't be sure. So maybe it was just a layer of confusion to buy them time had they been found out and Tenshi leaked the information before they made their move. And there was also no purpose for Tenshin to be disguised as Tenshi when he called Keen in episode 4, other than for anonymity's sake for the show. I am gonna throw a wild theory out there that Tenshin comes to our side during the intertwining timeline. Back at the harbor, you see Tenshin break into a sprint but then slowly walks the plank onto the boat, which allowed Chang to reach him. And Chang has been doing a good job of avoiding being grabbed the entire time, so why slip up at the last moment? I also don't buy the fact that Tenshin doesn't care about Tenshi and would ignore the fact that Keen threatened her. After their traumatizing childhood, they really only had each other left in this world whom they could truly trust. And whether or not one of them realizes that they're just being used, we'll just have to wait and see. We need to remind ourselves that Tenshin is not the final boss. There's likely still one more player in all this that we know nothing about. Given the recent episode, it appears that Tenshin is just following the orders of Keen, and Keen is just an ex-cop. So how did he get so well connected with enough funds to have a highly organized criminal organization? Remember, Keen is just employed by Minlu's father and he seems well connected with everyone in the family. And this person was brought up before, and that's Minlu's younger brother. I've said this already, and I still believe it that he's Tenshin's childhood friend, the purple-haired boy. His motives are still a mystery to us, but I did go in depth on his potential motives in my Link Click Season 2 theory video if you want to check it out later. Anyways, before it seems like I forgot, big shout out to the chief for being the only seemingly useful policeman at the police department. 3 guys let one guy slip out of a heavily guarded and surveilled building that is multiple floors high and also somehow doesn't check the washroom connected to the room of the escapee who likely hid in it. This scene where he falls onto his knees as a broken man due to the loss of his partners is not only heartbreaking but a very powerful moment. Now lastly, Tenshi, the real Tenshi. The person who helped start all of this, and where did she learn the events of the future, we have yet to find out. What we do know is that the only person she felt comfortable interacting with is Lu Guang, so he's the most likely candidate because she remained hiding ever since their meeting. We still don't know the full extent of her powers, just that she has heightened senses and whether or not it's in the same realm of powers as everyone else or something entirely different. We don't know, because she could have a photo or body possession related ability as well. Seeing her unable to speak and in emotional disarray is quite tragic considering her backstory. Upon his reflection, Chang takes a step back on his approach. It was only after Xiaoling starts to empathize with her of wanting to look out for a troublesome brother does she start to open up, which is a big point of progress for the story to get things moving. That's all for this week's loaded episode. If you enjoy my theorizing breakdowns, feel free to drop a like or subscribe. I upload these videos weekly as the episode comes out. And as always, thanks for watching.